This is how the news will get you. And this is why I don't be paying attention to it. Look at these headlines. Hello, everybody. How are you doing on this fine Thursday already? Well, if it's Thursday, then you know what that means. New episode of Study Break coming out tonight. I need to show y'all this trailer here.
There's no way a woman can understand this stuff and not be susceptible to it.
Are you ready to know the 5 attraction switches that exist in every woman?
He calls himself Mystery. The guys pay upwards of $1,700 to attend his seminars.
The really funny thing is there's no defense against it.
This birthday thing comes from apes.
Take a look at Matador and I, showing boys how it's done. Talking about Google Earth? I mean, if I talked about Google Earth, nobody would get within 100 feet of me. Have you ever heard of a program? It's a free program you can get on the internet called Google Earth.
All right, so that's a channel I just started with my friend Shelby from Deep Dive. I love that channel. I'm loving what's going on over there, so make sure you check that out tonight. But that's not why you're here today. You're here today to hear about the flight risk Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes is the former CEO of a, I think, bankrupt or defunct company called Theranos, which Elizabeth, as the CEO of this company, purported that her product could do all kinds of things. That actually wasn't true. The product could not do those things. And this woman was tried and convicted in a federal court, a district court, of conspiracy to commit wire fraud against investors in her company and wire fraud. And so once she was found guilty, she was also sentenced to, I think, 11 and a half years in prison, 135 months, and then 3 years of supervised release as to each count 1, 6 through 8. Okay, so basically what has now happened is Elizabeth Holmes, that's the lady with that weird voice. I know y'all heard this voice.
First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world.
She has now appealed the 2 verdicts where she was found guilty. During waiting for the appeal, she wanted to be released. She wanted to be a free woman until the appeal was decided. And so there were these court filings going back and forth from one side, the other side saying, no, she shouldn't be allowed to be free. She should serve the time in jail while she's awaiting appeal. Her side's filing documents saying, no, she should be allowed to be free. These are the reasons. Well, I was reading the news this morning and y'all, this girl done bought a one-way ticket to Mexico that was supposed to leave 3 weeks after she was found guilty. So the prosecution side is saying she was trying to run away. She was trying to flee the country to avoid her prison sentence. So I have the document here. Let me show it. So here's the case on Pacer. These are all the things that were terminated. She was accused of all these things. And I think this, pending counts. These are the ones she was found guilty of, which is the wire fraud and the conspiracy to commit wire fraud against the investors, 135 months, all that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this document was filed on Monday, and it is the order denying the motion for release pending appeal. A few pages long, but look at all the stuff that's been filed here. Here's the order filed a few days ago. And so because this is an order signed by the judge, so everything in this statement, the judge adopted as the judge's opinion, right? Following a 3-month trial, the jury found Elizabeth Holmes guilty of 3 counts of wire fraud against investors. The court sentenced her to 135 months of imprisonment with a surrender date of April 27th, 2023. So she's supposed to go this month, end of the month, to surrender herself to prison. Now before the court is Ms. Holmes's motion for release pending appeal, which has been fully briefed and heard, ECF, blah, blah, blah. Additionally, she has moved to strike certain portions of the government's opposition to her motion. Having considered the record, the court denies Elizabeth Holmes' motion for release pending appeal. They get into the procedural background where they're going to tell us what kind of happened from a legal perspective in the case. So on January 3rd of last year, a jury convicted her on 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and 3 counts of wire fraud against her investors. On November 18th, 2022, the court sentenced her to 135 months of imprisonment to be served all concurrently, followed by 3 years of supervised release, which is like probation, I think. The court also set a self-surrender date for Elizabeth Holmes for April 27, 2023, and she filed her notice of appeal back in December, and this motion followed shortly thereafter. So this motion being right after she filed her appeal, she filed a motion to be free until the appeal is decided. Then on January of this year, the government, which is the prosecution in this case, filed its opposition to Elizabeth Holmes' motion to remain free until the appeal is decided. Elizabeth claims the opposition contains factual misrepresentations and it contains confidential information. She's filed a motion to strike some of those portions. And then Then last month, March 17th, the court heard oral arguments on her motion. Then the judge gets into the legal standard. So what is the rule that the judge actually has to follow here? A defendant, that's her, Elizabeth, who has been found guilty and sentenced to a term of imprisonment must be detained, even if an appeal has been filed. However, there are exceptions, and the court may allow the defendant to be released if it makes the following 4 findings. Okay, so the judge is saying here, the only way I'm going to be able to let her be free until the appeal is decided is if I find the following 4 things. And you have to find all 4 of them. It's not like, oh, only 1 or 3 or 2. No. It says right here, the court may allow the defendant to be released pending appeal if it makes all of these 4 findings. Okay, what's the first one? The defendant, that's Elizabeth, has demonstrated by clear and convincing evidence that he or she is not likely to flee or pose a danger to the safety of any other person in the community if released. Okay, not likely to flee. We're going to get to that one-way ticket to Mexico real quick. The appeal is not for the purpose of delay, so the judge would need to find that, number 1, Elizabeth isn't going to pose a threat to the community, and she's not going to run away to flee her punishment. Number 2, the court has to find she's not just appealing this to just delay the process here. Number 3, the appeal raises substantial question of law or fact. So it can't just be some little menial issue on the appeal. It has to be something very substantial. The grounds of Elizabeth Holmes's appeal must be substantial, and it must raise a substantial question of law or fact. And then the 4th thing, so if the court were to find all of these things, the court still would have to find this 4th thing just to let her be free until the appeal is decided. Number 4 is if that question, that's this one from number 3, if that question from number 3 is determined favorably to defendant on appeal, the decision is likely to result in a reversal or an order for a new trial of all counts. So the grounds upon which Elizabeth Holmes or any defendant in this analysis, the grounds upon which the defendant is to base their appeal has to raise a substantial question of law or fact. And that substantial question that is raised, the court has to think about in the future and think, all right, the question that she raises here, is it likely to result in a reversal of the finding of the ruling or an order for a new trial? So if the grounds upon which the defendant's appeal are based is not substantial enough to actually result in overturning the outcome of that first finding, then you're not going to be allowed to roam free until your appeal is decided. It has to be a substantial question that would actually result in your whole entire ruling getting overturned. Okay, so those are the 4 things. I have not read this filing, but I know that the number 1 issue, the one about being a flight risk, is going to come to issue. I just know it is. So again, just put another way, if she is a flight risk, she cannot be free pending appeal. A, flight risk and danger to community. And they have a footnote here. The government does not argue, nor does the court find that the appeal is brought for delay. And then they cite a case number. So they're not even going to argue on this one right here. This number 2, the government and the court, everybody concedes she's not doing this appeal for delay. So fine. Number 2, satisfied. But we got to still get number 1, number 3, and number 4 checked off the list for her to be roaming around the streets free until the appeal is decided. So now we're going to get into the flight risk danger to community analysis. As to the first element, the court considers whether Elizabeth Holmes has presented clear and convincing evidence that she is not likely to flee or pose a danger to the safety of the community. The court will first note it does not consider Elizabeth Holmes to be a danger to the community if released. Okay, so fine. The second prong of the first requirement, satisfied. Well, what about this first prong? Because we need that for her to be roaming around the streets for free. I'm gonna do a little cross-off thing. I'm gonna try something new here. So this one, satisfied. This one, satisfied. So the rest of them, we got to do the analysis. Trying something new here. Y'all let me know if that's helpful. It's helpful for me because now it's like, all right, look, check. If it has a red line through it, checked off, she can run around, roam around free. If any part of any of these sentences does not get a red line through it, that means she can't roam around free. You follow? All right. Court does not consider her to be a danger to the community. All right. So we got to cross it out up here. Assuming then down here, the government doesn't think that it's for delay. So we got to cross out here. So the court says Elizabeth was convicted of nonviolent, although still serious crimes that primarily had the impact they did by virtue of her influence and position at Theranos. Today, she is in no position to inflict similar harms of fraud on the community, and the court is unaware of any evidence that she's likely to commit acts of deception or fraud in her everyday life. Now we're going to get into the flight risk analysis. With respect to flight risk, although it is a closer determination, the court also finds that Miss Holmes has demonstrated she is not likely to flee if released. Oh my gosh. So the court found that she's not a flight risk. So all this time I'm sitting here thinking, because this is how the news will get you. And this is why I don't be paying attention to it. Look at these headlines. Look at these headlines. Elizabeth Holmes' purchase of a one-way flight to Mexico was a bold move, judge says, in ruling that denied her request to remain free on bail. Doesn't that look like the judge said she was a flight risk? So this comes as a surprise to me if the headlines are any indication. They really be burying it in there and making it look like that's what they found. Ms. Holmes has presented evidence that she has made no attempt to flee. The court retains custody of her expired passport. Her appearance is secured by a $500,000 bond on her parents' home, and she has strong ties to the community, including 2 very young children. Furthermore, Ms. Holmes does not have any family or assets abroad, and the significant media attention this case has drawn further reduces the likelihood that she would flee without being quickly recognized. The government, this is the prosecution, argues, however, that Ms. Holmes cannot satisfy this burden because her partner booked an international one-way flight for them that was scheduled to depart a few weeks after the grand jury had rendered the verdict. Booking international travel plans for a criminal defendant in anticipation of a complete defensive victory is a bold move. And the failure to promptly cancel those plans after a guilty verdict is a perilously careless oversight. Certainly, this incident has invited greater scrutiny of Ms. Holmes' personal affairs and further speculation into her motivations. So the judge is saying, yeah, it definitely looks suspicious. Maybe her partner had booked these flights in hopes that she's not going to be found guilty. We're going to take a little vacation. But the court's saying, okay, but why didn't you cancel the plans after she was found guilty? The court's like, look, this is definitely making me raise my eyebrows. But after reviewing the lawyer's communications as of recent and immediate subsequent remediation, the court does accept Ms. Holmes' representation that the one-way flight ticket, while ill-advised, was not an attempt to flee the country. I don't know how in the hell the court would have found this, but they said they did. So guess what we can do? We can satisfy this whole entire. So now the judge has to do the analysis of whether the appeal raises a substantial question of law or fact and whether it's likely to be overturned, which I don't see how the judge is going to make this kind of determination, but let's see what the judge says. Accordingly, the court finds that Elizabeth Holmes demonstrated by clear and convincing evidence she is not likely to flee or pose a danger. Okay, so first prong of the test, satisfied. Second prong of the test, satisfied. All right, so now we're on to the third prong, which is the substantial question, and the fourth prong, which is the likelihood of reversal. Even though Elizabeth had presented clear and convincing evidence that she would not flee, the court does not find that she raised a substantial question of law or fact that is likely to result in reversal or an order for a new trial of all counts. The substantial question requirement defines the level of merit required of the question presented. The Ninth Circuit has held that a substantial question is one that may be fairly debatable or fairly doubtful. It must present something more than the absence of frivolity. So it can't just be a non-frivolous claim. It has to be substantial. It has to go way beyond just, oh, it's not frivolous. And it also can't be just simply issues that are debatable among reasonable jury members. On the other hand, the likelihood of reversal or new trial requirement defines the type of question that must be presented for appeal. The analysis does not involve assessing the likelihood that a reversal will occur in a particular case, but rather the court, and here's the requirement, the court must find the question presented to be so integral to the merits of the conviction on which the defendant is to be imprisoned that a contrary appellate holding is likely to require the reversal of the conviction, or it's likely to require a whole new trial altogether. In other words, Elizabeth Holmes has to present the correct type of question that has met the necessary level of merit. So there's a type of question that has to meet the necessary level of merit. For the several questions that Elizabeth Holmes has raised in her motion, the court will first review them to determine if they are the correct type, i.e., likely to result in reversal on all counts before considering if they arise to the requisite level of merit. So the court then goes through each and every one of Elizabeth Holmes's appeal grounds, right? I'm not going to get into all that. This video is already longer than I wanted it to be. I'm talking about hearsay. Let's get to the conclusion. Limits on the cross-examination. I didn't really follow this trial. I don't know about all these details. Admission of the Department of Defense misrepresentation. Finally, something about denying her a motion for a new trial. And so the court says, although the court does find that she's not a flight risk or a danger to the safety of the community, the court is unable to find that she has raised a substantial question of law or fact that, if determined favorably to her on appeal, would even result in a reversal or an order for a new trial. So the court basically said, look, Elizabeth Holmes got some stuff on appeal, but let's say she wins the appeal. It's very unlikely that it's going to result in her conviction being overturned. And it's also unlikely that it's going to result in her case being remanded for a new trial. So because the appeal is very likely not going to exonerate her, essentially, then number 3 and number 4 of the 4-prong test are not met. I think it's very interesting that the headlines really focus on the one-way flight to Mexico and kind of referring to her as a little bit of a flight risk, whenever that is not what the judge found. The judge did not find that she is a flight risk. Now, if you're asking me my personal common sense opinion, hell yeah, she's a flight risk. Hell yeah. I think they were going to get on the plane. She was going to go to Mexico. She was going to start a new life. That's what I think. That's my opinion. But the court did not find that. So it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is the court found. But all these headlines talking about she's a flight risk. Stupid. Anyway, she was buying tickets to Mexico, one-way flights that was supposed to leave 3 weeks after her conviction, whenever she was asking the judge, please let me free until my appeal is decided. I don't know. Anyway, I definitely don't plan on keeping up with that story. I just wanted to let y'all in on the one-way flight to Mexico. I will see y'all tonight at the Study Break premiere in the live chat. In the meantime, facts ain't defamation. Love you, Munich. Bye.